Calling the meeting to order for Tuesday, September 9th. It's a work session. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mumm?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Okay. Any future agenda items that we want to put forward from any commissioner? Nope. Hearing none, we'll move on to discussion. The library, I imagine that's you,
That's
Miss
me.
Librarian.
Great. Well, thank you so much, commissioners. And tonight, what we'd like to do is update you on what we've been doing so far with the design, the building site options, and make sure you're completely informed and up to speed on what we've been presenting to the public. Get your feedback on it, and hopefully by the end of the evening, perhaps even whittle away a few that are not favorites.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
So first of all, I just want you to know that what we've been doing in the last few months is visit every single neighborhood association that's had a meeting scheduled. The only two we haven't hit are Barclay and Park Place, just because they haven't had meetings scheduled since that time. So we've gotten a lot of input from, they've been very well attended, and
Good.
I've gone with one of my architects or the project manager to each one of them, so that's been great to talk about the site and just get people's feedback on all that.
Sure.
And then once we had the building options created, we've gone to the library board, the staff, the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association twice already, and then of course we had our open house last week, which unfortunately there were some conflicts that evening, so not everybody could come.
Yes,
but
there was.
so we've also, in the meantime, started getting gathering information and going deeper into information on some things. Not everything is completely done yet. So, for instance, our transportation study hasn't started yet, but that's coming up. But our geotech was done, but the report is not completely in, but we've got a little bit to tell you about that. And I guess that's about it. What I'd like to do right now is introduce our architects and let them run you through the options that they've created, and we're going to also be bringing you some information about what we've heard from the community about these things, and then the pros and cons that each one of them has, because there's not one that doesn't have pros and there's not one that doesn't have cons. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sid Scott, our architect, and Haley Blanco, who works
May I
at
ask a question?
SEA as well. Yes.
You said the geotech was done, but the report isn't finished.
Right.
Does that include the hydrology?
Does that include the hydrology? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Good evening. I'm Sid Scott, principal with Scott Edwards Architecture, and Haley, the ingenious architect, with me tonight. She'll be running the model, so as you really want to talk to her as
okay.
when you want to
All
see
right.
something. So
All right,
just
right.
want to get that up front. Yeah, she's in control. That's what I'm saying. It's great to be back, and as Mo was saying, we've had a lot of input from folks. We've been to a lot of meetings, and it's really been a very, I think, invigorating, a lot of robust, good conversations. And so where we're at right now, we're going to show you 6 options tonight. None of them are cast in concrete or even cast in sand at this point. It's really ideas. We're not worrying about what the building looks like necessarily. It could be very historic or very modern in the end. That's not what we're talking about. It's really looking at planning. Where should the addition go in the park? How should it attach to the Carnegie? Should it be 1-story or 2-story? So those are really the big things that we're looking at. And, looking at the 4 primary parts of the overall project, we look at the park, what's the impact on the park, what's the impact on the Carnegie, what's the impact on the neighborhood, and then the impact on really building a 21st century library. What is the impact of that on each of these? So want to start with some of the things that we've learned just in starting the project and learning about the Carnegie. It was renovated in 2000, and there was seismic work done at that time. But one of the things that we've learned is that it wasn't a full seismic upgrade to the building. So it does not comply with what would be current seismic code requirements. Now, what that means is that depending on how we interact with the building, how we would remodel it, you could take the approach of just, well, let's seismically upgrade the whole building up to current standards, or you could say, whatever we're going to impact in the building, if we're going to alter a wall, then we will need to bring that wall up to current seismic code. So it's it could do everything or just do it as you need on the building.
So, like, how do you know it wasn't completely done? I mean,
Well, based on we have all the design work that was done in 2000, and we had our structural engineer evaluate that. So, based on their evaluation, I mean, it's I don't think it was intended to be a full upgrade, because at that time, I mean, you'd have to sheathe the roof, which would need to be done now.
I see.
There's those kind of things.
okay.
So it's good. It's good, and it's a definite improvement. But if you wanted to bring up to current code, there would be more work to be done to it, and actually a fair amount, I think, because you'd have to get into you'd pull all the interior finishes off, all the finishes that are on the walls now, all the trim, all that stuff. The roof would come off. You'd have to do a fair amount of work to do that.
Okay.
So it's
Yes.
still considered an unreinforced masonry?
It has been partially reinforced.
Okay, but it's,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
So if something happens, you go to the part that's been updated.
I know where I would go, but I'm not going to let anybody else know that. So, no.
Outside.
I'm like, which corner's been updated here?
I think Mo's your spot is. I wouldn't hang out there. No, I'm just kidding.
I'd fly out the window.
So what that did was really starting to talk about if we, there's going to be lots of options we're going to talk about tonight, but one is keeping the existing entry to the Carnegie.
Sure.
And so that has an impact on how much seismic work would need to be done, as well as some ramping and some other things that we'll talk about. So it's a wonderful building. We're going to talk about a lot of, I think, great opportunities with it. But the seismic is definitely going to be a part of it as to how much or how little we end up doing in the end.
I think we need to put a big glass cube over the entry.
Glass cube.
Brick wall.
Well, I think there's so many options there.
The ideas are flowing already. I like it. All right. Cool.
No, it's where we've already been.
We don't want to go
Okay,
back
we
there.
won't go there again.
We don't want to go back there.
So, looking at the park, it's got the library entry and approach in the front, so Beaux-Arts planning kind of concept, very formal, I think, very nice. We got the play area on the south side. We've got the tree canopy on the north side, and then there's more open space on the back side along Jefferson. And then I think everyone's familiar. We've got slope up to the corner there at 7th and Jefferson, and then the other part about the site that we know is that there is basalt, not too far below the surface, which will impact us depending on which option you end up deciding to go with in terms of cost and those sorts of things. So, looking at the Carnegie, as I was talking a little about the seismic requirements, and you can see that it's essentially 2 big rooms on the main floor, and so whatever we would do, for instance, if we kept the existing entry and made that the new entry, I think that we would really want to open up that wall around the fireplace to be able, because you'd be flowing through that to get to the new part. So that's going to require some form of seismic work. And what happens if we start to cut holes in it, then you got to do the whole wall.
Right.
For instance, that wall that the fireplace is on, that's actually a bearing wall, so it's a structural wall. So there's going to be impact there. And then in the basement, there's a fair amount of usable space down there. But if you've been back there, the back side, it steps up about 1.5 feet, and we think that's because it was following the basalt.
Right.
As they were starting construction, they're like, oh, easier just to,
Just to,
step
yeah.
up. I'm guessing
Well,
that's
sure,
what
that
occurred.
makes sense.
Because right off the back of the building, that we do know it's about 6 feet down there in terms of hitting the rock. Now, the fact that there's rock doesn't mean that you couldn't do anything with it. It's
Right.
just, it's rock. And
It's-
sometimes it's chippable and you don't have any problem, and sometimes it's, we get down to bedrock and then it's more difficult.
Okay, while you're here, I've got a question I was going to ask later, but you're into it. So do we have a cross-section that shows the depth, the geotech, the depth of the basalt? Is it pretty level grade, or does it slope down someplace where the basalt is lower in other places?
That's a great question, and we literally just got their initial, we don't even have the final report yet, and so we don't know the answer to that. But what we do know is that I think it's consistent with our thoughts. It's not too far down, and I think it's
Uniformly.
probably going up, yeah. But we'll know more here in about a week when they'll have the report finalized.
Okay.
We've ended up having, initially, I'm not sure why, they only did, from prior work, only did 2 test pits right behind the building,
Oh.
which then that's when we're like, yeah, I must have stepped it up because it was only about 6 feet down to hit rock. So now we're doing a number of test pits, or they have been done all the way across the site, so we can get a better picture of how it's really going underneath there in terms of the rock.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so looking at the elevations, beautiful building, done in the kind of American Renaissance style with some Georgian influence to it. You can see, the primary pieces to the building. It's got a very strong base and a body and a capital to it. So as we start to look at the renovation of this, and we go to our first option, any question about the existing building? I'm just going to move in here and then fire away, if you think of something as we're going. So the first option we looked at was saying, well, what if we kept the existing entry intact so that everybody came through the front door? So we'd need to ramp to it somehow. So what this option is showing 2 ramps coming from both corners. And the concept there being those would be at a shallow enough pitch we wouldn't have to put handrails on them, but they would be a continuous sidewalk that brings you up to the entry, and then a new set of stairs out in the landscape area there. And then this concept is constructing a 2-story building on the back of the building along Jefferson. And the idea, again, that you would enter through the existing building and then flow through that, and we're not sure what spaces would be in the existing Carnegie, and then into the new part. So a couple, and then the obvious thing with this one is it has the smallest footprint by creating about a 7,500 square foot footprint on the site, and you can see the impact it has on the pieces around the park. So there's some. That's, I think, one of the good things about it in terms of just the land conservation part. One of the things that we face with 2-story libraries. Well, in fact, this would really be a 3-story library because the existing building is 2 floors,
Right.
and then the addition would be at the same elevation as the ground floor plus another floor on top. So you'd have effectively a 3-story library. And at this size, those are harder to operate in terms of additional staff required. You've got spaces that that you need to monitor, that sort of thing. And the other thing we see with 2-story libraries is that they're in terms of flexibility for the future, and that's really the push in the 21st century library is multi-purpose, because we don't know in 100 years. You get to do this once every 100 years, right?
Yes.
And so what is the library in 100 years? And so it's really designing a building that can be as absolutely as flexible as possible so that things can change. It's a little harder with 2-story because you're more limited to what you can do on each floor. And the other part of a 2-story is that we've got to provide vertical circulation. So a couple stairs, an elevator, that's going to take up square footage. And then if you've got a 2-story library or a 2-story addition, I think you'd want to have an opening, some sort of an opening in there so that you really have some kind of connection between the 2 floors. So that'll take up square footage as well. So I think in a 2-story, less footprint on the park, but I think you're end up with less program space or less usable space inside unless we make it bigger, or you'll end up with just in general less area. I think it's going to take roughly 1,000 feet for all those vertical circulation spaces and that kind of thing. So. And just general note is we're looking at about 15,000 square feet for the addition. And the existing building is it's right around 6,000 of really usable space in there between the upper floor and the basement. So this option, 2-story, and let's go to the model. So with each of these, we've modeled them, and again, this is not to talk about style, because we can make these look like anything, but the idea of the massing, how big it is, because as part of this being on the National Register, some of the key things are going to be the addition should be subordinate to the original building. It should be compatible but different, so that the Carnegie stands out, so you know
Right.
what the original building was.
Yeah.
So this first one is the idea of a 2-story addition to it with the entry through the front. Let's go to the next scene, which will give us a view from 7th and John Adams. So it gives you an idea of looking through the canopy, how it would look. And then let's go to the front to get a sense about with the ramps and the stairs. So you can see one thing it does is, if you remember back to the original proportion where they had it's a very strong base to the building.
Right.
This essentially takes that away in the front side by being able to ramp up to it, or with getting that accessible entry. So that's just some of the considerations of it. Yes.
From that view, it implies that you wouldn't see the second floor from the sight lines. Is that a realistic view? I mean, the mass of the original Carnegie, from that viewpoint and that level, would it actually mass the building?
I think obviously the closer you get, the less you would
Right.
see of it. And
Right.
is this at 6 foot or eye height?
But yeah, I'm wondering from the street.
Yeah, I believe we've got this set at 5'6", so roughly eye height to it. So it gives you some idea. But it is back a ways, so I think it's a good point. Now, if you move it to the sides, you'll see,
Right.
in terms of, and let's just go ahead and go all the way around. And then I'll just say, we're still showing the ramp down. That probably wouldn't be there. We got those kind of things that we'll be working with in terms of design elements. But it gives you an idea of the size of it. And then also, we're not resolved in terms of what it would look like on the Jefferson side, but it gives you an idea of the scale of it as you swing around. And then another part I think is really going to be key is how do we touch the Carnegie with this addition. So this idea is to create a small connector off the back side and be attached to it.
But this keeps most of the park.
This would have it would keep the by going to 2-story, it definitely would keep more of the park area.
And it would keep the play structure over with the spray park.
That's correct. And we can talk more about that. We've been actually discussing the play area and some options with that as well with these. So that gives you an idea, and hopefully, is everybody getting dizzy or everybody
Absolutely.
okay? Okay. Dramamine is probably not a bad thing with this. Okay, so let's go on to the next
Vertical's
option.
kicking in there.
And what we can do is we'll run through all of these. Ask questions as we go, and then we can just go back and talk about them. I also have brought boards with all of them up here, so we can reference that as well.
Okay.
I was mentioning this earlier today, it's kind of an unusual process, because normally when you start a project, there's a pretty obvious solution, to it. And this has been awesome because there are so many good ways you could do this that, I think there's so much potential with all these.
Yes.
So option 2 is to say, all right, we've got some key trees in the park. There's those 3 maples. Can you point to those, Haley, please? The 3 maples. I thought, well, how could we work around that? So we started working on this idea of doing a more organic shape, which would be in a nice contrast to the existing Carnegie. And this idea would have an entry on 6th, so creating a plaza space that would engage with the spray park. And this is where I'll just mention we have expanded our scope of our looking at this to include that play area now. So our landscape architect, who has done a number of park projects here in Oregon City, is in the process of starting to look at how this could be revamped to include play area in any of these options.
Okay.
Because I know that's very important. We've heard it, and we're definitely listening and
Good.
responding to that.
Good. Thank you.
I'll just mention on this one, we're showing the playground over on 7th Street, and we heard loud and clear, that's not a good place.
That's not a good
yeah,
place.
yeah,
That's not a good
yeah.
place.
And we weren't disagreeing with that by any stretch. But
And we don't want to fence.
Sure. Yeah. So this one would have a new entry on 6th and creating a plaza over there. And let's go to the model on that one. Has kind of, I think, a nice engagement with the spray park and the opportunity to create a nice plaza area there. So again, you know, the style could be anything, but it does show you, you know, 2-story. And I think from an interesting standpoint, what a curve would do with the Carnegie, it could be this, you know, very dynamic backdrop or, you know, canvas that the Carnegie sits against. Let's go ahead and spin around to the other side. One thing I forgot to mention in the first 2-story option, one of the things we were thinking about is we were showing it as all glass on the 2nd floor. But in reality, if you're up on the 2nd floor and you're looking out over the top of the existing Carnegie, it's not particularly attractive. It's got mechanical equipment and it's a roof.
Well, yes, you're correct about that.
Yeah. So that was just one consideration. That's actually when we started thinking about this one is, you know, refocusing the views to the trees and that sort of thing instead of across the roof area.
Or you could paint a design. Rocky could design something.
That's right. That's right. So it's just one of the considerations, and
Yes.
all of them can be solved. But that was something we were thinking about with that one. Okay, so let's go ahead and go up. Now this one would step back further, so you know, potential to have a bigger connection piece between the existing building and then the addition. And then just go ahead and zoom around.
And so in this one, you wouldn't have to take out that bearing wall inside because it's not the primary entry. So the entry would be
Right, yeah, so
untouched.
excellent point, yeah. So with the idea, I think with the, you know, if we kept the entry as it is today, it's going to be more a flow-through kind of space, you know, to get to the addition. And a little harder to program it, I think, and make something really special out of it. I think an opportunity with a new addition would be to say, okay, now this is a jewel. It's going to be something very special, and you could, you know, use it as a reading room or a maker space or, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 2-story curved option. Then we'll look at some 1-story options. The first one we call the non-building. The idea with this is to build across the back of the library. And build it in a way that I call it a green building. Essentially, all the walls that would be solid would be covered in plants, so that they could be living walls. The roof would be a green roof, and the part of the library that would be facing John Adams could be glass, where it would be reflective of the park and the activity that's going on in the park, and reflecting the Carnegie, and then at nighttime it could just be this, you know, beautiful lit, very welcoming kind of space. So the idea again being it's more of tucked into the park, so it's almost like the park just came up and enveloped the building, that kind of concept. Yes?
So would that be dug down so it's about the same height as the Carnegie?
Right.
Okay.
So in all of these options we're showing you, we're thinking the floors would be aligned. So the addition, so that we avoid ramp space, which is going to take up more square footage and, you know, present some obstacles in terms of accessibility. So again, this could have the entry to the Carnegie where it is now, or creating an entry on the 6th Street side. One of the things that we've thought about with 6th and Jefferson in particular is a lot of interest in parking and getting parking close to the entry. So, you know, these kind of options start to address that in terms of being able to get perhaps a handicap space or two out there, and, you know, you're closer to the entry. And go to the model on that one. So you can see the difference of the 1-story versus 2-story just in terms of its relationship to the Carnegie. And again, this idea of and it's hard to render that at this point, but the idea that this would be a very green building and very reflective of the park. And go ahead and spin around. You know, our thought is to bring trees right up to the glass, so it looks like it's going right inside the building, and again, really reflecting that.
And how many square feet on this?
It's 15,000 square feet. Now, what it does do is, the site slopes up to Jefferson, so the building becomes more buried as we go up that way. And the other thing that we'll run into, I'm sure, as soon as we get the geotech report, is that we're going to hit rock in those areas, so that, there may be more work to be done in order to do this kind of an option where we would dig into the hillside.
So more rock to be dug is going to be a higher price.
It potentially could be. We've done many projects where it's, stuff that if you can chip it, it's not a big deal.
Right.
If you've got to do more with blasting and that kind of thing, that would certainly be a bigger deal.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's some of the things. We're guessing, just based on what we've seen, is that, the rock is going to follow that as like the slope.
Uh-huh.
So that's why looking at the flatter areas would be, that's one of the pros, is just from a constructability standpoint.
Okay.
You said plants right up to the windows, up to the glass.
Yeah.
But then I also heard green vertical walls or something like that.
Right. So the non-glass areas.
Okay.
So the walls that
Would
are
have the
solid
gardens.
would be planted.
Because I understand that maintenance is extremely expensive.
It is maintenance for sure,
Yeah.
and
For the vertical gardens.
Yes,
Yeah.
Bill has said, one of
I-
our vendors or retailers here in town teaches that. He said it's prohibitive from his point of view.
it's and that's a great point, and there is more maintenance to it for sure.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay, so let's go on to the next one. So the next one was looking at an idea of wrapping the addition more around the Carnegie. And so in this case, what we're looking at is the idea of a new entry, but that new entry becomes a plaza space that, your experience would be going by the Carnegie as you go to the entry. It's facing Adams, so it's got the same orientation as the current entry. And with this idea is to not only, it's a building in the park, but let the park come in. So we're looking at an idea of bringing a courtyard space into the library, which could be an outdoor reading room or lots of possibilities. And it's another way of bringing wonderful light into the building. One of the things, and this will be once the option is decided on, is really looking at, as we start to program this, is where the children's space. There's this wonderful
Yes.
connection between the children's space and the outdoor play area. So some real opportunities with this of bringing that, really engaging with that, with the play area. And then I'll just mention play area while we're on this. So one of the things that we're going to start looking at is how to repurpose that area into, and what could you get out of it in terms of play area with the spray park and play equipment.
Well,
Okay.
I can, if I can, tell you, I don't know that I like bypassing the Carnegie Center, just because I like for people to have that feel when they come in. And this kind of feels like it's a new, but it's an addition. So I don't know. I just don't feel like that would do the same for me.
So by having a new entry
Yes.
versus the existing entry.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Good point. Now, and like I said, any of these will work with
Right.
entry or not
Right.
the entry. I mean, that could be an outdoor reading room or whatever
Right.
you wanted it to be. But one of the things we're thinking about with this option, really with all the options, is how can we enhance the connection to the Carnegie. So like, for instance, in this option, if you go to the up above, Haley, please. So the idea, if this, from the front side, you see the courtyard. But the idea here, if that was the entry, bringing out some kind of a canopy so that it's saying entry, and it's covered once you hit the steps, that kind of thing.
So you would kind of, if you were to pursue this, the front entrance that is now currently there would kind of not be an entrance.
One of the things we're looking at is it could be a secondary use.
Okay.
But if it's a primary entry, it's got to be accessible.
Right.
So that's where the requirement for the ramps would come in, the
Right.
accessibility.
Yeah. No.
So my take on it is however we end up deciding to do it, we'd want to rebuild those front steps because I think they're right now is the proportion is a little awkward in terms of I've seen folks kind of stumble as they're going up there, and so no matter what, I think you want to do that.
Sure.
Which will get them back closer, I think, what the original stairs were. So whether that's the entry or it could be used as a secondary entry, as long as we had two legitimate, accessible entries to the building.
I understand the 88 thing.
Yeah.
I get it.
So the idea with this is, if that was the new entry, courtyard in the center, space there. So in this case, you would experience the Carnegie as you walked by it, and then once you got inside, have a open glass space that engages the back side of the building. And then the idea that we could then take and basically, like, you extruded the library, the existing library, right up to Jefferson, and have that as all as glass on that side, so that from outside you fully see the back of the building.
So would you also have an entrance back there?
That's a possibility as well. And then with this one, the idea is breaking the scale of it down more by having pieces like the part that, for instance, is on the north end that could poke out into the tree area. Could be a reading space that's out in the trees, that kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at this option, and then we had discussions about the play area and what's potential there. So then we put together an option of, we call it the reverse wrap, but it's basically taking it and flipping it the other direction, where the addition would extend into the canopy part of the park over there. And again, could be entry on that side. One option we were talking about with this one is keeping the entry on the 6th Street side as a possibility. So some of the things with this one, I think it's very different in terms of how it will feel from 7th, obviously, because now you're going to create a more of an edge on that side, which the other one will create an edge on the 6th Street side.
Right.
And then the other thing about this option is that we really are getting into the slope of the park. Mm-hmm. And so, maybe we do taller space or something to get more light into the spaces based on the north and the east side along 7th and Jefferson.
So,
Yeah.
When you're creating these options, did you take into consideration the new parking lot on Jefferson, towards Jefferson and 7th, as far as the entryways? Because that's quite
Good point.
a ways from any of the entryways.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that lot, I think when it's all said and done, it will have about 19 parking spaces in it up there. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a discussion about, based on that parking lot, what's the best way to bring folks to here, and that may be creating an entry on Jefferson. This one would say, well, you could have an entry from 7th where you come down and then a sidewalk connects you across. So yes, very much so. And that's going to be part, we're in the process of a traffic study going on right now, and so they're going to be looking at parking from all directions. But I just my own experience in walking around, there's lots across the street. There's a lot behind the church that is a public lot, so people are coming potentially from all
areas.
directions,
Yeah.
and then just a lot of folks walking to it.
Well, and the more entrances you have, the more staffing you have to have
Yeah.
around those entrances, I would think.
I've been scolded by Mo several times now about the number of entries. So
Well, it's nice to have lots of entries. You do have to consider security of the items.
Yes.
So, maybe what you just have is more security gates. We don't have any right now, but in the future, we would probably hope to, so.
okay, we haven't looked at the model on this one. So it opens up on the south side, and then would be built towards 7th on this side. There's something kind of cool about the idea of having an entry through the canopy of the trees. There's a kind of a classic feel to that. And if you go up to that corner, you'll see how far down it goes up on the corner of 7th and Jefferson.
Right.
So if we went that direction, I think we'd look at doing some walls where we could have light wells down in there, and figure out. There's lots of ways we can get light into the building.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So then we thought, well, what if we went underground and let the park go right over the building? And so this option has the 15,000 square feet underneath the south end of the park. And I think the interesting thoughts actually have come out of some of the meetings with neighbor folks is looking at, we were thinking the entry would be through the addition, and then you would come in, have this lower space, which light then would be filtered down through with elements that would come up. And I mean, we're not saying this is by any stretch the final solution to it,
Right,
but
right.
there would be ways to bring light into it through light monitors, that sort of thing. And then the connection to the Carnegie would be underground, but one of the thoughts was to actually, in this case, use the Carnegie as the entry and then create a two-story space that would take you down into the addition, which I thought was a pretty interesting idea. So let's go to the model on this one. The colorized is a little easier to see with this one. So you can see some ideas even around having, still continuing to have the spray park in the center. You could have elevated areas that have glass in them that are used for sitting, that sort of thing with it. So it's an intriguing concept. I think, the technical feasibility of this, we'll know more as we get the final report from the geotech.
It's going to be a huge chunk of change to do that.
Well, this one is certainly it's the most risky from a cost standpoint because you don't know until you start into it.
Yeah.
Lots of interest in this one. Really lots of interest in all of them. It's been really, the feedback has been, I think, fantastic. And again, I think robust feedback on these.
Well, I think that's one thing you can say about Oregon City citizens. They will share their opinion with you.
No shortage of that, and I really appreciate that.
And we all appreciate that.
You want to know where folks stand.
Yes,
So-
absolutely.
Have you done a cost-benefit analysis on the long-term operating costs versus underground and above ground?
No, we have not, but that will be something that we'll do if this looks viable and folks are interested in doing this, is to see, certainly from an energy standpoint, it'd be huge savings underground. And there's a lot of great examples, of adding on to libraries with this kind of solution, and very successful. So I think it's been the focus of some good discussion. So those are the options, and the trending that we've seen has been very consistent amongst all the groups. Was more of this kind of idea of a wrap has been the leading, vote getter. We do ask people at the end of each meeting to, if you were going to pick one, which one would you pick? And we always ask, if you're picking the underground, pick another one too, just in case this was
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
technically feasible to do it. So that's, from a trending standpoint, that has been by far the strongest. I would say 2-to-1.
The underground.
No, to doing the wrap
Oh, the
version.
wrap.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which version of the wrap?
At the last community meeting, because that was the first time we actually had this, we talked with the McLaughlin neighborhood folks, and we talked about doing this reverse. We brought that and talked about that with them, and also at the community meeting, and that one got a lot of favorable response.
Right.
When we first looked at this, we looked at that one that was a green roof. Is there nothing under
The
consideration?
slope?
Yeah.
No, we didn't. We have the two-story behind, and we have the long bar that we pursued, but we didn't pursue that one.
Right.
I'd say the one with the green walls is as close to that. Yeah.
That's really the same concept.
Yeah, the same concept, just not slanted.
Yeah, and what I thought that one did was really set the Carnegie off by itself. So,
So thoughts, comments?
Could we look at the one you're talking about, the green walls in color?
Yeah.
We don't have it so that it's all green in the
Okay.
in the model. So if you could imagine all those
I don't
green.
have a good
Yeah, so this is showing us like darker surfaces would actually be the green walls and then green roof on top.
Well, from my point of view, I didn't like the option. I liked the option where you wrapped it 7th Street, this one right here,
reverse
so that the
4.2,
6th
okay?
So 6th Street still had all the spray park and the opportunity for the children over there.
Mhm.
I personally like to have one entrance, and I personally would like to see it go through the main Carnegie myself.
Okay.
a lot of ADA fixing.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's the con, I think, with the one
Uh-huh.
entrance is the
Uh-huh.
ramping.
Yes,
It
the
does-
ramping.
It changes the look of it quite a bit,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So either take off the front so that it's not an entrance at all, enclose it or whatever, and move the entrance, or do the ramping.
I might pose a question. My apologies for being late, and I think you should continue the meeting since you started. But one of the concerns I had with the second option that you have there is I think there should be some compatibility with the McLaughlin neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
And that curvature, I guess maybe we had some Victorians that had curved turrets, but round turrets, but other than that second one seems not to fit the character of the neighborhood. I was hoping to have a design which, as you approach the Carnegie would dominate. You suggesting not having the entrance
Yeah.
on that one side, that probably would help. I've got a thought. You've mentioned the possibility of having actually more than one entrance to the building.
Mm-hmm.
And if we located our handicap parking and so forth on Jefferson Street, and actually had the ramp coming into an entryway there,
Yeah,
the nature
that
of the
would-
stairs is still, even though people trip on them, having stairs, there's still what used to be, and so maybe some thought could be given to that. And the entry can be used by others too, approaching it from Jefferson Street.
Right.
I think it was you, or maybe it was Kathy, who was mentioning the proximity to the parking lot would be a benefit to having that second entrance.
Yes.
My concern is, I guess, that might require additional security or staffing. And Maureen, have you thought about that at all?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we talked.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, we have talked about
Oh,
that.
yes.
The double entry.
We do have 2 entries right now, though.
We do
Yeah.
have two
We
entries
do.
By
right
the
now.
Yeah.
children's.
That's
Right,
right.
that's
and
true.
the main,
Yeah.
so
That's
we
true.
already have 2 entries.
Yes.
Yes. And
The entry on Jefferson Street is a really interesting thought. I think that if we're going to have 2 entries and one of them is the existing entry, I guess my thought is that the other entry not be on the exact opposite side of the street, because as long as that's an entry and it looks like the front of the building, then I think that's where people are going to be drawn to. And so they'll get there, and then a certain subset will realize they can't go in there. And then they have to go all the way to the other side of the building.
They'll be frustrated.
To me, it does create some confusion and frustration. So that's one of the reasons I was thinking that if there was a second entry, if it was visible from the front of the building in some way, shape, or form. And I personally really like the 6 street area somewhere in that vicinity being available for the entry. We have looked at the Jefferson Street entry a little bit. The elevations could end up being quite a trick.
Yes.
About
know.
12 feet higher on the Jefferson Street side than the existing floor line. So, there's about a 1-story difference there.
And
One of
that,
the-
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead.
It could be connected though by pathways.
Yeah.
So
The-
from Jefferson.
The things that we know about Jefferson, in terms of handicap parking on it, it's going to be really difficult because of the slopes. We can't get them flat enough to meet
Right.
the requirement for a handicap parking space.
On
This-
Jefferson Street?
On Jefferson. And so the slopes would be very difficult. And the sidewalk is steeper than, for an accessible route, that kind of thing. So I think, it's where we're really at is if there's a direction to go with this, then we can really start looking at all of those kinds of things as it would apply to whatever option it is that you want to move forward with. Because I think that's really important. A great point about the parking lot over there. Is that going to be, how do we access that? What would an entry on Jefferson, because that could work with any of these,
Right.
I think.
Yes.
So, I think that we can solve all those kind of things.
I just got at 4 o'clock a ruling out of the Ninth Circuit Court for the city of Loma Linda, California, addressing ADA access to public properties. And they found in favor, especially of the handicap parking and access to the public facilities. So that may be something we need to look at. It just happened a little bit ago.
Yeah.
So
That's current?
it's very good. Well, actually 358 is what
Okay, 358.
So,
A couple minutes later.
Yeah. But, something to think about when we're thinking about all of these is keeping this ruling in mind.
Yeah. Well, one of the thoughts on the 6th side, while we were looking at that initially, it's pretty flat on that side.
Right.
The ability to get either drop off, handicap parking, accessible parking on that side, and then really have a accessible route to the building that complies with the slope requirements.
And
So that's one of the attractive things, both on 6th and then also on John Adams.
well, I know something that we're looking at in Portland is we can't make the entrance any less prominent for the ADA accessibility
Right.
than for the others. And
Absolutely.
so it's
Yeah.
got to be as grand
Right.
as the
Yeah.
other.
And I think that's such a, I think that's the real deal. If you keep the existing entry, you're going to have to really make it work. It's got to be,
Absolutely.
and so I think just from an overall just impact on the building, it's going to definitely impact the front.
In my opinion, you could take this one away, option 4, because I think that having the kids over on 6th is way better than 7th, in my opinion.
I think, well, I just wanted to reiterate an earlier comment is that we are going to look at, if that's the direction to go, is what, and this area actually shows a little shaded area there, but what could be developed in terms of play. Because,
Right.
we know that it's going to be very important to keep that component in the park.
Absolutely.
So whatever direction you end up deciding, that's going to happen.
And I agree on that side where you have the cluster of the play area together and you can watch the kids
Yeah.
of all ages in one place.
Right, very important.
I mean,
And I personally think we need to update the play equipment over there.
We'd
My
be
God.
happy to.
yes, I'm sort of glad you said that because I just have the complete opposite view.
I love those
The,
swings.
the swings and the slide. The kids like that because it's
Yes.
a big slide. And the kids
Yes.
like it because they can swing
Yes.
way out.
It's not safe.
But it is not. It is not safe.
Well,
it's awesome.
I guess the question I would raise, and this is something that the city can answer, is how many accidents have we had out there besides my granddaughter? But that was in the Children's Museum, so that was something completely different.
Yeah, and Scott Archer is not here, so I cannot answer that question.
Yeah,
But I can tell you that drop from that it hurts.
Yeah, I'm not
It
saying
hurts
does, but
many parts of your body
I can
when you
understand
get
if
older.
when you drop I expect a little more wisdom then. But anyway.
Personal experience here.
My question is how many accidents have occurred before we make that judgment? If in fact it is truly an issue and there's a long history of it,
Sure, sure.
then maybe we need to do something else.
Yeah.
The point is you got a park that's diagonal off of Jefferson and 6th
That we can add to.
Yeah.
little kids can go to.
Yes.
And so. I mean, the one reason I like the flip of this is because it preserves most of that area and potentially could maintain the larger play equipment.
Yeah.
Something we have to look at too with that though is once you touch the play area, right? You've got to bring it to compliance.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, I'm not a playground expert, but I've done enough to know, there's, just like in a building, play areas have accessibility requirements. Mm-hmm. And so you're required to provide a certain number of accessible activities, events, and so it would be different than is there an hour added to it in order to do that.
So if we don't touch it, we don't have to do anything.
Okay.
If we touch it,
My kids love it just the way it is.
There's a
How
lot
can
of
we do this without touching it?
We build a little cone of something over that. during the-
there's a lot of cool playground equipment out there these days.
There
Very
is.
cool.
And I think,
Very cool.
that was where the conversation started. We really ought to look at what can be done. Maybe it's leave it like it is. Maybe it's reshape it. Maybe it's add some new pieces. I mean,
Yeah.
just be open to some ideas and
Yeah.
then, decide on how it could best be utilized. Because I think you look at your park, there's so many great features about it, and we know the importance of keeping those intact. Now, they will be, potentially different in terms of what they are now, but there's no reason why you couldn't keep all the same features.
Right.
In that amount of area.
I have a lot of comments. So I agree. I've been over here raising my hand for the last 30 minutes.
Well, the mayor
To be
hasn't
quite
been
honest.
here.
Yep.
He said you are still in charge.
That gets us nowhere but trouble.
So yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been said, and you weigh both sides. I agree with comments like the existing entrance should be one of the prominent. To me, it should be the prominent entrance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I agree with that, but at the same time, I understand that someone in a wheelchair should be able to go through that doorway, and the solution, which was option 1, is not that good in my mind, and visually because of the ramping to get up to that entrance and how it changes not only the park but the visibility of that original building, and from the street you just are kind of hit with these levels of massive amounts of stairs that go up, and it just seems like this huge barrier. So I don't know how to weigh using that existing entrance and still making that accessible to wheelchairs without, changing the front of the building. So that's kind of one of those that I'm weighing back and forth. I like the two-story. I think the two-story options are problematic because of staffing, just like the multiple entrances. So I see that that's probably one of the reasons that we wouldn't want to maybe go towards those. But at the same time, I was weighing that with what was, at least from this commission, the overall overwhelming consensus of the original concepts, which was a two-story building, which was glass and drew us all to agreeing that we even wanted to put the library there. So I'm kind of weighing those. I think the the good things about option 1 is, and having two-story building is, obviously one of the things we've said, which is more park space. I don't like the looking at the roof, but is there some way to do a green roof or have a patio of some sort on the roof? I don't know. liked that view better once I saw from the street that maybe you don't see that second story as much. I'm not sure in reality if that would be truthful or not, but the second option, and I'm an art teacher, you guys, so I know. I like the contrast. I like the idea of having the original Carnegie just the way it was, with this backdrop that could be lit and could really just showcase the Carnegie. And does it fit in with the neighborhood? Yeah, probably not. But I still like the creativeness of that and making it an attraction that people see. But I think on all these concepts, my one true hope is, how do we make the Carnegie look like the Carnegie as it always has been? And I think that concept does that, or at least helps try to do that. Whether or not you agree with a curved, abstract building, that's a different topic, I guess.
Can you look at the street view of that again?
Yeah, right from the front. Maybe up a little bit. So I guess I could see that wall be either lit a certain way or covered in by trees in a certain way that would make the Carnegie still be its original. And again, I guess you could do something similar with a non-curved building, just by using that, less windows on the side that's kind of the background.
Mm-hmm.
That's two-story.
Yes.
Yeah, I think. The third option, and I like all the concepts there where you're kind of masking the building with the trees. I think there is more ways to mask the building than we have really seen. And I think back to the original kind of concepts of the roof. I know that there's a lot of issues with having a park that's on the top of a roof and all those kind of things. But I think in addition to fronting windows with trees and walls with vertical gardens, I think there's ways of, and I've seen examples in other libraries I talked to Maureen about, where there's maybe gardens that kind of step up to the building, or various plantings that step up to the building, where it allows light to come in a similar way that you show on the back, but even in the front, where that landscaping guards the building, so that you don't actually really see it. So an underground concept with the building actually being above ground. So kind of a mix of those.
That's the new option.
That's the new option. We're just adding to your list.
Now to the wraps. I like these options. Completely disagree with the option of having. I disagree with the option of having the wrap to the 7th Street side. Although I agree with the concern about the play space and all that. So.
Could you specify why? It's just
yes. Okay. So this was a discussion we had at one of the meetings at the library, where it was a very interesting discussion, probably the most beneficial discussion about this kind of wrap concept, and a lot of people were kind of starting to talk about 7th Street, and there was one citizen who kind of talked about making the library kind of the most, real prominent building, and that, some of these prominent historic buildings, that you see right from the street, right from the main street. And so she was definitely kind of wanting to look at having a really prominent entrance that faced 7th. And then that kind of went with a further dialogue about all the other new development on 7th that we are saying should be to the street. So, Mike's Drive-In, when it's redone, it's going to be to the street. When Olson's Drug property is redone, it's going to be to the street. So you're going up 7th Street, and the message in that opinion was that it would be consistent with that. In my opinion, maybe we don't want it consistent with that, because every time in history that anyone's ever gone up 7th Street, it's been an open park, and to give that building the prominence that in one point was kind of saying put it to the street, I think putting the addition to the back allows you to see that Carnegie building like everyone has always seen in its history, driving up 7th Street with the park still there, seeing the Carnegie Center with the addition in the back, and even from 7th Street going up the hill, you still see the church, just like you always saw it prominent with the addition kind of hidden behind the Carnegie. So it keeps that same historic feel. Now, I think you have to definitely weigh that with what everyone's saying with the play structures.
Right.
But I like the fact that the new addition of the Carnegie then kind of fits with the new addition of the church.
Right.
And they're kind of there. But you still have that feeling that everyone always remembers when they first saw that Carnegie building coming up the hill. So I think the discussion in itself was really interesting on the which side you flip it, because I think the argument can be made either way of why it would make the building look more prominent. I think I'm just going to go back over these and to see if there's anything else. I think that's pretty much it, but I think the main thing is you were definitely trying, in my mind, to make that Carnegie, which we've all said, look the way it should, and really be a prominent piece of that, and not kind of get lost by the addition. And I think, ways of masking it, like we've already talked about, or the one thing that really sold us on that original concept was the idea of the windows reflecting the park, and the idea of the windows allowing you to see through the whole building, which we're seeing in a lot of these concepts too. So I think kind of keeping that going is a very good thing to do.
Which of these options, which is the one that you feel that would keep the Carnegie the way it is?
Yeah, I think that it's not up there. I think that what I said, though, is that the wrap, I think the wrap does that to some degree, and I think depending on which side the building wraps, really changes that. I think the, two-story curve does that, whether or not it's a curve or whether or not it's a two-story, but I think there's a couple, of those concepts that definitely try to put the Carnegie kind of in a different realm than the addition. I would love the underground, but I think we all know that may not be realistic. In the ideal world, that I'd pick that.
So it is up there.
It is up there, but is it realistic? No, it probably isn't going to ever happen.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
What is our height limit? Is it 35 feet?
I think it's 45 feet.
In that neighborhood?
Is that right? I'm sorry, I don't have that. I mean, we did the study on it, but I can't remember how high it was.
Is it different there than it is down here?
It's all mixed use, or that's
Okay.
institutional there, so it's higher than residential.
Okay. So is there... No, just calm down.
What's she going to say? Oh, my God.
the thing that keeps going through my mind, and it's going this way, is MoMA. And so I'm thinking of something very open, but 3 stories.
Is what?
The Museum of Modern Art in New York City.
Oh.
And but it's so open that I think it could take care of some of the staffing problems.
Oh, just through sight lines.
Mm-hmm.
Salt Lake City's that way.
And I don't know if that's something we want to think about or not, but it just
3 stories adds cost,
Yes.
and it does add an awful lot of height
Does
Probably
it,
and mass.
if we went down some though.
Like
That's
4
gonna
feet.
add cost too.
yeah, I don't think that was it. That's
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest impacts you get as the more floors you go is your footprint gets smaller, but you still lose the same space for circulation, the vertical circulation, the stairs and elevators. You know, so if you did a 3-story building, for instance, say 5,000 square foot per floor, you know, if you lose 700 or 800 square feet of that to circulate the vertical circulation, then it makes the amount of actual usable area on each of those floors, you know, quite a bit less. So that's partly with, like, you know, with when you have multi-story buildings, it's the efficiency of the footprint as to, you know, how flexible it is and how much you can do with it. It's a wonderful example, though.
Well, I'm just thinking you got the courtyard, you've got the ramp, you got everything going there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess,
Good thought.
how does that affect the mass in terms of looking at the Carnegie, though? It's going to stand up higher.
Well, I'm
Yes.
looking at the church steeple over here, the church,
Yeah.
whatever that is, turret. And thinking if you did something back in that corner.
Mm-hmm.
Could we go to
I think it's an intriguing idea. I think the efficiency would become a problem with it, just in terms of the actual usable area.
Could we go back to option 1 for a minute?
Option 1.
Mhm.
There are things I really like about
Yeah,
this
there
option.
I do too.
It is symmetrical, and when I think
Yeah.
of the Carnegie Center, I think of symmetry, and it's a sturdy building.
Yeah.
And so to kind of
Yeah.
have that, behind, to me, it really complements it. The thing I don't like about it is changing that entryway and having the ramps and just changing that.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
a way to put another entry on another side? I mean, right now we have the ADA entry that goes down to the children's
Right.
area, and then they
Mhm.
take the elevator up.
Mhm.
That's
So again, this is with this option, you could certainly create a new entry, whether it's either side. And the point about it being symmetrical, you could do it on either side, whether it's to the 6th side or the 7th side. And I'll just point out other things. I mean, we put a hip roof on this. It could have any shape of roof, that kind of thing. So again, we can make it look like anything, but you could definitely create a new entry with this one.
Because also with the steps up and with the ramps up and making it accessible, removing that interior bearing wall and changing the inside of that, and then having to bring that up to seismic, standards, that concerns me too. Interfering with the interior of the existing Carnegie.
Right. So you're making more modification, from a historical standpoint.
Right, and I hear over and over again, try to leave the Carnegie the way it is, and then complement it and do justice to
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. Good.
The other options might have covered it, but I got to get this one out because it is what impressed me. I wasn't generally impressed, but the one thing that impressed me about our, I believe it was the visit to Hood River, where the wall, the exterior wall of their Carnegie, actually built in the same year as ours was the interior wall of the new building.
Yeah.
And
It
if
was
we could catch
Yeah.
that, I think
It
that
was
would be great.
Well, that is actually where, just back to the wrap for a second, that's where that idea started, was engaging, and originally had an idea of engaging it more in terms of the exterior wall. But I think in all cases, we would definitely do that here, so that once you're inside of the library, you're still experiencing the outside walls of the Carnegie. Yeah, we're thinking even it would be really cool from like Jefferson side, if we had all glass from that side. At night you could light up the old wall
Mhm.
so that it really stands out. So there's ways to really give it punch. And, because, I mean, what we're going to look at is whatever option you decide to go with is, we're going to figure out any way we possibly can to celebrate that building from all sides.
Can I suggest we try to, rather than a single option tonight, maybe if we could come up with two to look at in more detail? Is that
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
Or you?
No,
I don't think.
Yeah.
So Mayor, I'll just
Oh,
wait.
sorry.
I had a suggestion along that line there that might help move the project forward, but still give you some flexibility.
Yeah.
So I'll wait till.
I want to go back to the first one again. So I guess after what I said earlier, going back to this again, I may not have focused on how much I enjoy the first option because I was so put off by the stairs and the ramp and everything else. So I think this is very much the first concept, or similar, very similar to the first concept that all got us to say this is where we want to build the library. But I look at this and, the conversations about the roof. Can you imagine being up there in that upper part and then some sort of a green garden on that roof, or even maybe some small piece of that roof, like the back part of the Carnegie, where you could actually step out onto a patio and then have on the roof? I mean, there's ways you could do something similar to that. And I think just looking at this view right here, it's like, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
From the historical standpoint, one of the things that we'll struggle with that is having a green roof on a historical building.
Right.
Unless it just grew there naturally, and I've seen some good examples of that. But you are not going to want that.
So what then?
options
Yeah,
then
what
do
are
you
the
have?
other solutions to dealing with, that, the eyesore of what would be the roof essentially?
I think you can still have
Um,
movable planters that can move on that roof, though, right?
If it's possible to do that, if again, that would go to the structure and what is capable of,
Right.
holding there. But certainly looking at this two-story idea, if that's the way you wanted to look, go in that direction, or even look at that, would be to, the connection between the Carnegie and the two-story, that could become a green space.
Right. I mean, what if that
and
second?
there's ways to handle that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if the second floor kind of, I guess, I don't know if that's possible or not, but if the second floor came over into the top, kind of overstep part of it right into there, in all in glass, where you might have a little space. I don't know if that's even possible, but there's, I think, addressing how that roof looks. And,
gallery?
I don't know.
Like we've got things as pieces out in the park.
Mm-hmm.
You could make a lot of lighted, interesting pieces out there that maybe would hide some of the mechanical.
Oh, on the roof itself. That would be interesting, wouldn't
Sculptural. Well, partly with the new addition, we're going to be able to clean up a lot of the stuff that's on the roof now.
Yeah.
Right.
New mechanical system, and
Right.
so you make it look as clean as you can, but it'll still look like a roof.
Right.
And that's the.
We could
Ye-
paint a mural up there.
Absolutely.
Betty is a true Oregon City.
We can do something with a roof. Yeah. So kind of where do we go from here? Do you?
Right. So tonight, what we were hoping to do is maybe eliminate a few options.
Sure.
A few would be great, and
Yeah.
maybe focus in on what you guys really would like to see developed more. And then we'll be going to the library board tomorrow and reviewing some of this stuff with them. At some point in time, we do need to get it down to, and some point in time, very soon, says my project manager, in order to move forward with the timeline that
So-
we need to.
So
I've been trying to keep score here a little bit with
Mr.
these
Fraser.
with these comments, and
good luck.
I know. So what we're trying to do is we might look at this as like naming a child. Are there names here that just there's no way you can take these? And you got to make sure you're working off the same list. I went through this not that long ago, and I lost my list, and it all worked out. But it seems to me I have concerns, and I expressed this to Maureen earlier today. I have concerns about the basement option.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Tornado Alley may be more appealing, but I have concerns about the maintenance long term and some of those other issues. And it is it's a stark it's interesting and very creative, but it is a stark
We
departure.
like as much daylight as we can possibly have.
Yeah.
in the winter.
Right.
I agree.
So I just got the feeling that
The
there might be a
basic-
consensus that if you were going to have to walk away from here tonight and at least accomplish dropping off 2 of them, that could be maybe one of them, that
I'm
there's a
not sure.
consensus.
I'm
One are you
sure
saying?
she-
The
The
basement.
I'm not sure Kathy
The
agrees
six-
with you.
No, I don't agree at all.
You like the basement?
I love the
Okay, I
basement.
missed that one.
Well, no, I mean,
Okay.
we can continue the discussion on. It seemed to me one of the things that was standing out was perhaps, I'll call it 4A,
4A.
the one wraparound.
Yeah.
Yes.
4.1, I think.
4.1.
4.1.
4A.
two.
We know where you're headed.
Yeah, well, probably both the wraps, but
Yeah. Yeah, and I think number 1.
I would agree with that too.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually, when I did the total over here, I was trying to total up positive comments and
Yeah.
negative comments. I did miss the love of basement, but
Love of
I
basement.
apologize for that. But it seemed like option 1 and option 4.1, the wrap, seemed to have the most positive and fewest negative comments from you. I don't know if that means anything.
4.1 is the one that is wrapped to 7th.
I think
Yeah.
Wrap to 6.
6th.
Yeah.
Only
Yeah.
the play structure can
Can
get
move over.
moved.
So again, I'll just
Right.
say, in all of these, that we're going to look at that. So
Yeah.
if you decide, hey, let's look at number 1 and let's look at number 4,
Yeah.
that's, we're going to be working on the play area and any and
Mhm.
all of the above.
There's 2 reasons I would like to keep looking at the underground. Number 1, when the geocheck comes in, and number 2, for long-term maintenance, long-term costs as far as operating costs. I think that we've got a lot of cost-benefit analysis to look at there, because we're going to save a lot on heating and cooling and all that kind of stuff.
Like you said, you mentioned hydrology earlier, and there's constant hydrostatic pressure on those,
Right,
on what's
that's-
underground. So
why I wanted
that's
to
going to
look at
require a
that.
lot more study. If everybody thinks that they can live with the design, then we should study it further. Because you're right, there's going to be cost and benefits, both in the maintenance side, but also many cost savings on the heating and cooling side.
About the sewer connection for that one.
We have a history with that on the site, don't we?
We
Mark?
already do.
What was the
System.
question? What was the
Sewer
He
statement?
said it.
connection.
He asked about
Yeah.
sewer connection.
Well, I think if you went underground, just some of the things that I, off the top of my head, would look at, you would undoubtedly would need a dewatering system for it. I think our report, we were hearing the construction across the street, they were hitting groundwater about 9 feet. So, I'm expecting that'll be something similar there. So dewatering, pump system for your sewer, those kind of things. But, again, it may be a trade-off on how it, over a long term, it costs to operate it as well. But I think really the answer to this one, we'll have it in 2 weeks, which is if it just looks totally infeasible to
Right.
do, then we'll know.
Do we know where Singer Creek goes through there exactly?
No. not
There's
exactly.
suspicion right through there.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
then that'll probably take it up.
I was
But then we thought that could be positive, run it right through the building
Right, have
as
the creek go right through,
It
yeah.
will be the water feature.
fishing stream through the building.
Yeah.
So I think this one is that we'll have much more definitive information in 2 weeks
Okay.
that we can report on that.
I was going to say that I think until the restoration of the Carnegie occurred, that basement flooded almost every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did,
Really?
a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, a
So
lot.
some work was done, I think, to drain the water out of that area, but it was a major problem.
Well, if it's, the way the site's set up, it all slopes to it's running that way.
If we're
And when you've got rock down there, it's a good chance it hits that and just follows that along. So that wouldn't surprise me.
So what about option 2? What do you guys think about option 2? I know, Rocky, you spoke in favor of that.
I don't like that at all.
I didn't care for that one at all. But I didn't want to take it off the list if
To me, it
you
takes up
had.
too much land.
If you had.
No, I mean, I was just speaking for the contrast. the important thing for me is that there's a contrast between
Oh, I'm
the historic building and the new building, and I think that can be done in other ways.
I think that's a great point because any of these will, once we focus into the option that you want to move forward with, we're going to talk about things about compatibility, contrast,
right.
Subordinate, all of those things that are going to play into how it
Right.
will impact the existing Carnegie.
I misspoke. I was thinking option, the big, long, wide one that takes up a lot of space. Not option 2. I do like option
R1.
2.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh,
so like
three.
option 3, is that what you were looking at?
That I don't care
That
for.
you don't like?
Yeah.
Can we do a head count on each of these?
Yeah.
Yeah. that would
Yeah,
be-
we should have. Maybe we should have brought the dots.
No, I
actually mentioned that. We could brought the
Dots
dots.
on a computer screen.
We will conceptually take the dots.
Okay.
So, Mo,
let's
can you
start
mark
with
up
one.
there once you?
So option 1, option 1.
Can we just raise our hands?
Raise your hands.
We can just
Wait.
go on
Are we gonna ask them to like pick every single one they like, or pick their top 2?
Well, hang on a
We're
minute.
trying to
We
find
can't
out
make. Excuse
how many people here want to look at each option.
Mayor,
You
we
only
can't
have
make
two of them.
decisions because remember we're not
We're in a
voting.
work
We're just
session.
trying to reach a consensus.
No,
Which ones you
yeah,
want to-
That's true, but the point is, you want to eliminate some of those options, and somehow there's a decision process going in there, no
Is
matter
there-
what you call it.
Right. We're trying to reach a consensus about which ones you prefer that we continue to study.
Yeah, okay.
You're not
So-
making any final decisions right now.
You're correct.
I understand.
You are very correct. We're not making any decisions. So if option 1 is something that I could say I would like to pursue more work done on that, I would be able to say
May I ask
that.
a favor? Could we look at them on the screen from the street level, because I can't see them that well from here?
Of option 1?
Yeah, of all of them, as they.
Oh, yes, yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I like option 1. I think you could look at the roofing
do too.
issue.
So do I.
Yes.
Now, can I just ask, so on this one, the other thing that we mentioned is that we could look at a new entry with this
Right,
option.
yeah.
So
right.
that would
Yes.
be,
Yes.
I won't say 1.2 option, but I'm just saying that
There'll
is
be
certainly an
another
opportunity.
entrance,
If I-
yes.
Right, so I think in whatever options we
You're
go
gonna
forward
have to
with,
have
we
two.
should look at that.
Yeah.
We should look at both ways
Yeah, right.
and see what the impacts
I
are.
think, right. I think there was a strong feeling that we didn't like that stairway the way it was out there.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've heard that,
Congratulations,
you
you
know,
have one-
very
at least one
consistently
option.
from the neighborhood groups, from the community, from staff. That has been very consistent.
Yeah.
Yes.
So does everybody like option 1?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, in
Okay.
fact, I like it so much, I want to put both of my
Dots there.
dots there.
Wow.
Because there's several reasons. One, it's very symmetrical.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me of the kind of the massing of the police station. I mean, the fire station, excuse me. The fire station right up there. And I think with the entrance where you can keep the front the same, I like that one. It really reminds me of the original inspiration that got us excited about the whole project. And
Yeah.
keeping the park, keeping the integrity of the park.
Yeah.
And having
so
an-
both dots there for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we each given 2 dots now?
You each get 2 dots.
Oh, yeah, sure.
2 dots. You don't want to give us any more than 2.
No, I sure don't.
No,
Okay,
you
so
sure don't.
option 1, and we'll look at it from both, new and old entry.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, right.
option 2.
Yes. Yes. Okay, option 2. If I could say I really don't care for option 2, I would like to say that.
Me too.
I don't care for it either, but I reused my dots.
Carol's already used her 2 dots.
But you guys know we
You're
don't
on
do
break,
things
I
on
guess, now.
3 to 2 votes here very
You're not
often, right?
confined to 2 dots.
So we're trying to
You're not
find.
confined to 2 dots. You're not, no, you're not confined to 2 dots.
So we're trying to find the one that is going to be worthy of future study. And if
Yeah.
there's really 3 of you already that kind of are Luke or no don't like that, I think we're trying. If we get out of here and eliminate 2 of these, that
We'll
gives
be
our
good.
team a
Okay.
lot more
Yes.
direction about what to
Yes.
continue to study.
Yes.
Okay,
More.
so we were on option 2.
Right?
That was good.
You heard my
I'm not putting a dot on it.
Okay.
no dots
There you
there.
go.
Sounds like
Okay.
2 is out.
Okay.
Option 3, if I'm the most vocal here tonight, which it looks like I am, I would say option 3 is not one of my favorites.
Oh,
It
good. I
takes
was
up
gonna take your
way
dot
too
away.
much. You're going to take my dot away. Takes up way too much of the park, in my
Yes,
opinion.
no
I
dots for
agree.
me.
I agree too.
Okay.
Okay.
wow.
Right, that's it.
Great.
Congratulations, you guys
This
are
is great,
doing
you
so
guys.
good.
Option
This is going
4.
very well.
Option 4,
Point 1 or point 2?
You
Why
know,
don't we call it option
Now-
4?
Option four.
I'm just
Option
going to say
four.
that.
Yeah.
Option 4, we
Is
can
just-
flip-flop
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
It's the concept that we have around.
Yeah.
Option 4
And
is
it wasn't a
fine.
flip-flop in the voting, by the way. It was voting the building.
But with option 4, I didn't really like the entrance like right next to the main entrance that we currently hold. In my opinion,
Okay.
it should be on a different side. And
Well, I think-
that's something you guys can work on.
Yeah,
But
I think-
in
and-
my opinion, having it.
Mo had brought it up as an idea of even if we flipped over to the
Doing
7th
it.
side, having the entry on the 6th side.
Yeah.
You know, so that kind of thing. So again, if that's a concept, then we can start looking at
Yes.
options,
Yes.
you know, around all of those things.
Right.
So then
Okay.
on to option 5.
Well, wait, we didn't
Oh.
vote on 4.
I'm sorry.
Yep,
Option 4.
yes.
We're not
Yes.
voting, but if I could vote, I would say let's
Okay.
pursue
Yeah.
Okay.
option 4.
There wasn't one of you in the discussion that didn't like at least one of the 2 versions of
Right.
option 4.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Even the non-voter.
Even the non-voter who put her 2 dots, she used up her 2 dots.
Early in
You
life.
wish you would have hung on to a dot now.
Maybe half a dot.
Half a dot.
But it's not.
Wait a minute, now she's going to 1.1 dot.
And I'm going to tell you, I reserve the option to use 3 dots, and I can do so if I want to.
We're going to bring the dots next time.
Option
I love
5.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on to option 5
Option
now.
5.
Okay, I got a dot there.
Okay, 1 dot. I would say I would not put my dot there.
I think I've used my 2 dots, and I'm not going to use it.
So nobody's got any dots left
No.
except Kathy and Rocky.
I used mine too. I mean, I agree with Kathy on Underground 1 in the sense that it keeps the building, you know, I think why
Right.
she likes it is because it keeps the building the way it is.
Right.
I think we all pretty much know how unrealistic this concept is. I mean, we're getting little bits of information already about the water and the rocks and all this stuff. I mean, if all that came back and said we have no problems, then I would be like all over this. But I think that's not going to happen.
We could be dreamers.
Yes,
Well,
you can.
we could, but I already wasted my dots.
Okay, so do we have enough direction?
Option 1 and option 4 are
Right.
the ones that you'd like to see studied more.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is review this information with the library board and kind of, I want to get their take on it as well.
Absolutely.
And then we'd like to come back to you as soon as possible. And I originally had talked about even coming back next week to have you select one. I'm not sure we're going to have everything we need, but I will be in touch.
Well,
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
I know we've got option 1 and option 4. If option 5 comes back absolutely dry and no, I mean, just
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's
so
what I
it comes-
thought.
yeah,
It
and
was-
you know, it's-
Absolutely.
yeah.
We'll let you
We'll
know.
report no matter what.
Yeah.
On
Right.
what,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's just part of the due diligence here, and we'll let you know what we found out.
And the other great thing about not having to make a final decision tonight is now that you've seen these and had all this thought-provoking conversation, you've got a little bit of time to think about these designs. And so, Mo, if it's okay with you, the team, maybe we can send them renderings or whatever we have electronically of the different versions, so you can think about it a little bit more when you're like with a quiet cup of coffee and just looking at it.
I would, if I
So-
might, because Rocky said under certain conditions he'd be all behind it. I wouldn't. I think daylight is so terribly important
Yeah.
to reading and I mean, we tend to live in a gloomy environment in the winter anyway. And
Yeah. It's true. It's all true.
we don't seem to be worried about the bomb anymore, so
Yeah.
Could
So we
nickname it
can come
something.
up, we can come up
Call it
with
the
right.
bunker.
You never know.
The book bunker. I mean, it's a perfect.
Love it.
A book
I love it.
bunker. Cutting edge.
All
I
right.
like
So
that.
do you think you have enough direction from
We do.
us?
Yes, that's
as,
very
So
helpful.
our-
as crazy as we are up here.
Yeah. Congratulations.
That was
That
great.
was, that
Great
was
feedback.
well done. Well done.
So
guys.
we're going to look at option 1, existing or new entry, and option 4, we'll figure out
Yeah.
some ways to start solving. Because I think that one in particular is how we're going to integrate play into it. We want to
Right.
be able to respond to that.
Yeah. Definitely so.
One last comment on the option 4. Is there? Well, I guess maybe that would take us back to option 3. Never mind. I was just thinking. I was just
Go
thinking.
back.
Well, doing a more symmetrical version of option 4, but I guess that would be very similar to what we're
one.
seeing on
Oh, yeah.
that other option.
Yeah.
But
I think, just mentioning on the symmetry part, and we'll talk about this more as we bring them back, but, the thought, like with that option 4, is that you can use the proportions of the existing building to start to create symmetry.
Right. Right.
Not necessarily from a site, the park standpoint, but from as you view them, you can have something that is similar size-wise in the new
Right.
park that
Right.
matches the existing. So
Right.
lots of things we'll look at, and we're delighted to look at both and
Okay.
come back.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Would the commission entertain a short break?
Sure.
Between these topics?
Break. Back in. Road concept plan, and John Lewis.
Thank you. So we're here to talk during work session about the Leland Myers Road Concept Plan. We presented it to a variety of groups, including the Planning Commission, who blessed it with their vote of approval. So our hope is to get it on your next commission agenda with an ordinance for adoption. So that's on the 17th. So and the plan is complete with some comments from the Planning Commission that we plan to incorporate into that. And David Brokaw is with Wallace Engineering, so he's going to go through the presentation. He's done the lion's share of the work on the study.
Okay.
Thanks, John. So I'm going to try and breeze through the presentation relatively quickly here. Assuming you guys have taken a look at what we've been doing, we've met with a number of people, as John said. Again, my name is Dave Brokaw with Wallace Engineering. We were brought on by the city to look into this particular corridor and some of the issues with it. We put together a report that addresses, this is the layout of our report, and addresses what was there, what needs the corridor has. We developed some alternatives and put those alternatives towards the public, came up with a final plan, and looked for implementation on that plan. We originally broke the project into 4 segments, and we've broken out a few more based upon how we've estimated costs for the project. The breakdowns in segment are more along topographic lines, and they're kind of color-coded in this particular slide. As far as existing connectivity, looking at the corridor holistically, it has a lot of gaps in both bike lanes and sidewalks. That was one of the major factors that we looked to address in our report. Those major concerns, obviously the connectivity for sidewalks and bike lanes, issues with non-ADA compliant ramps, safety issues through the corridor, specifically some of the narrow shoulders and the windiness of Lynn Avenue. There are stormwater concerns in addition, and the right-of-way throughout the corridor is also of particular concern. From those, we identified priorities. Again, getting a full multimodal route through the corridor, improve connectivity, improve safety, and address those stormwater issues. This is taken from the TSP. It's kind of our justification for some of the narrower recommendations that we're making for the corridor outside of what is in the standard design. Again, here's our corridor improvement plan. The first segment 1, being Lynn Avenue from Jackson to Park. We're looking to do a shared use path on the west side of Lynn Avenue for uphill direction, and then a widened shoulder to provide access for bikes and pedestrians on the east side going downhill. Yes.
You said 82 feet is your right-of-way you need in through?
Nope.
Nope.
This particular cross section is a 40-foot travel width from edge of wall to edge of wall. The right-of-way would extend a little bit outside of that.
Okay, because I was thinking, I don't think there's 82 feet in
No,
there.
there's not. Yeah, very constrained right-of-way throughout the
Yes.
corridor.
There
We looked at some other options within this, incorporating sewer master plan issues, including that sewer replacement. Looked at the curve radius, options to realign Pearl Street, incorporating some TSP improvements like the pedestrian activated signal at Charmin, and then also looked to potentially close Electric Street and add a left turn lane into Charmin at that location.
Can I ask, before
Yeah.
you go on, can we go back there? In your map, the blue indicates exactly what?
The blue is potential proposed retaining walls. There is some widening that needs to happen through there, and we do understand that incorporating retaining walls in this topography is going to be a challenge, and there's going to be some serious design that needs to happen to get that wall built in there.
I know I attended a meeting at one point where there was some discussion, and the thing is, you do have some pedestrian paths through Singer Creek Park. And is there any thought of trying to incorporate them into this actual traffic design?
I'll get to that.
Oh,
actually.
okay. That's fine.
So
That's fine.
we've evaluated options through Singer Creek Park as part of this corridor
Okay.
study. We looked wider than just
Yeah.
the Lynn Avenue corridor.
Actually, before you switch, so Commissioner Polly asked about this one, and one of our hallway conversations a few weeks ago. So describe the shared use path and how that would work for bicyclists in particular.
So the intent of the shared use path, and the reason we had options where we had sidewalk and bike lanes, and trying to incorporate that. This particular section we wanted to avoid any major widening because it would be too hard with the topography, and so we looked at some options, and the shared use path we recommended because it provides benefits for bicyclists that wouldn't necessarily take the lane going uphill or wouldn't feel comfortable in a bike lane adjacent to traffic there. So a shared use path will allow some of these users, like little kids on bikes, to go both up and down the hill and feel relatively comfortable in those spaces where they certainly wouldn't taking the lane in the street. Yeah.
But you still have the bike lane going down the hill, or the.
I'm calling it a widened shoulder.
Okay.
Our feeling is that you will still get pedestrians using that side of the street.
Mhm.
So you need to provide for them. You can't stripe it as a bike lane if you expect to have pedestrians using it.
Okay.
And the intent is that cyclists going down the hill on that side can cross it over that lane into the travel lane, take the lane if they need to, and then come back if there's pedestrians in the way.
What is the white lane on the right side of the two yellow lines? What is that?
That represents the existing center line that's there, so it kind of
Oh.
shows how
So
the
it's
lane
gonna
is
show
shifting
it.
slightly.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
So why are you going to close Electric Street?
So Electric Street, it provides several opportunities. One, it presented itself as a traffic hazard. There was a lot of crashes at Electric Avenue. Didn't particularly like the large radius turns to get into that street. It allows people to take it too fast. And then we were looking for opportunities where we could do stormwater improvements. And then closing Electric, it doesn't serve any particular properties. And it's duplicated by Charmin. So, you leave Lynn and you tie right back into Charmin.
Right. Right.
So we thought that closing Electric would provide some opportunities. Maybe you could use it as parking for the park because there's not a lot of parking to Singer Creek Park. You could use some of that space for stormwater improvements that you're going to have to address with the increase in impervious area that we're adding as part of this project. And it just seemed like a safety improvement as well. In doing so, you could kind of smooth out the S curve that's right there, add that turn lane in to Charmin, and felt like a safer option.
Because those roads are very close together.
They are very close together, and that's
And then there's a crosswalk right there.
Right.
So it's pretty hazardous.
We also proposed the idea of adding a dedicated, it would be a left turn lane if you're coming down the hill onto Charmin. So that would be complicated, I think, with Electric Avenue as well.
You would take that whole
State open.
triangle there and convert it into a roundabout.
I like that idea.
In a
It's on
big
page
I'm
hole.
gonna
80.
get my roundabout.
It's right there on page 80, Commissioner Mo.
Roundabout in that location. I love it. I love it.
Because
a big pit
those
in the
roads
center.
go to the same road.
Well, they do.
They're
They
just
do.
Two entrances
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the same
It's just
road.
it's a triangle. A triangle about is
Split
what
up
it
by
is.
a crosswalk.
I have no idea.
What? Kathy?
Why is it called electric?
Rocky has the answer. He'll let us know at the end of the meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll figure that out for you.
Thank you.
I have no idea, but Rocky might.
Yeah, Rocky will figure it out. Anyways, in my opinion, I think it's a good idea to close that because that's always been, in my opinion, happened. So, anyways.
Okay.
Finally, we're thinking alike.
So you can say, you can say that. Emphasize that you agree with the plan.
I agree with
Okay.
John Lewis. I'm not going to throw him under the bus on this one. Maybe the next one.
Okay, segment 2 is from Park, is Lynn Avenue from Park to Warner Milne, Warner Parrott. This has some connectivity throughout. We looked at adding sidewalks where there's gaps from Park to homes and in that area, and addressing some of the curb ramps that are non-ADA compliant. As part of these improvements, we're going to incorporate stormwater facilities where needed and where available right-of-way is.
I have a question. So from the segment 2 on up, does it look like 2 sidewalks then on both sides?
Yeah, if we incorporate the improvements of segment 2, it would be sidewalks on both sides of the street, complete. Segment 3 has a lot of lack of connectivity. We looked into adding sidewalks, again, similar stormwater facility treatments where it was necessary and where we could fit it in. We looked at a pedestrian signal crossing and clearing some of the site distance issues at Pease Road, but addressing generally lack of connectivity throughout that particular segment. And segment 4 as well has ditches that come right up to the edge of the pavement with very little shoulder. So looking to update this road to a more typical cross section. And then here's the Singer Creek connectivity improvements that we looked at. Singer Creek in itself is kind of an island out here. It has very little connectivity to the neighborhoods around it. And so we looked into some additional pedestrian pathways. This particularly looked at routes getting people up and down the road. For some reason, I had a route between Glenwood Court that disappeared. Maybe that's on the Lynn Avenue.
Glenwood Court is
Sorry,
there.
right. Just south of the park.
Yeah.
So there's plans for a sidewalk in that segment
where?
in there, right here.
Okay.
Within the plan, maybe that's in the segment 1 improvements. But this would provide some opportunities for people who didn't want to use Lynn Avenue to get
You can just
down
go
the
off.
corridor.
Yeah.
Now, does this go along Singer Creek there? And
So we looked at it does from Park
They can't
to
see your
Yeah, I
They
pointer.
can't see my pointer. From the Park to Pearl
you can
Street.
go ahead. We just can turn around.
Yeah, from the
Yeah.
Park to Pearl Street, it does follow Singer Creek,
Uh-huh.
and it crosses over. There's a driveway access right here that crosses
Yeah.
over the stream, and so
Yeah.
we would utilize that to cross it.
Do we have right of way there now, or
There is some right of way. You'd have to get an easement over some of it,
Cool.
but there is some right of way just from Pearl Street to this point here.
We also own those 2 parcels
okay?
near Pearl.
yeah.
We did
plot
investigate running a path along Singer Creek down here, but it just became unfeasible.
What parcels do we own?
On Pearl.
Just
Right
off
at
of
the end
Pearl.
Right there,
Pearl.
those 2, perfect.
Right there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's great.
We also looked at Gardner School, Gardner Middle School. There's lots of impediments to access to the school in itself. No sidewalks coming from Lynn Avenue. So looked at opportunities to provide sidewalks there. There are accesses provided from the cul-de-sacs at Reliance and Laurel, but those accesses are somewhat limited in that there's fences or they stop. They're just not connected. And so
Well, you
looking
can
to
get through to
Some of them you
Gardner.
can. Actually, the one, I'm forgetting the name, is Haley Court. As actually, there's a fence that blocks that
They
access.
closed that one, but you can get through on Rylands.
You can get through
Right.
on Rylance. There's a fence that has a gap of about 2 feet.
Yeah.
So it's not ADA compliant, and it's grass.
Right.
So there's issues with getting people to and from there. You can't ride your bike right through it.
No, you have to get off and walk it around.
So,
Hey,
so
Dave,
looking
one
at
thing that I thought we changed, but on Hood Street, this it seems to me like the sidewalk should be on the other side so that the students don't have to cross their parking driveway to get to the school.
On
that's
Hood
That's
Street?
a detail. Yeah.
Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because cars
Yeah,
come in on Hood
that's
Street,
true.
they go through
Yes.
the parking lot and then come back
Come
out
back.
on
Yeah.
the other
And
one.
Yes.
There's a lot of traffic on those streets.
So if
during
the
school
students didn't have to
days.
cross and just could stay on the outside of that
Yeah.
travel pattern, that'd be better.
That would be much better.
And I thought we'd change that, but
we had to.
So, have you talked with the school district about maybe removing the barriers so that kids could get through Rylands Court?
well, we've been active with the school district. They've got lots of desires out there, but I think they're supportive of the plan. They've been supportive of the plan.
Okay.
As part of this, we also looked at the roundabout option for updating Warner Milne, Warner Parrott, Central Point, Lynn, and Leland. As part of this, we went through. There's obviously been some major concerns from people in the public about this particular design. Specifically, the Plaid Pantry owner
Yes.
has some legitimate concerns about the impacts to her business that this roundabout will have. We have discussed with the Planning Commission about moving the roundabout center to the north and east, north and west, closer towards the city-owned property. When this was originally designed, the intent was to avoid impacts to the building that exists on the site. But it sounds like there's some opportunities there, potentially of moving the building. Now, when you do relocate the roundabout to the north and west, you are still going to have impacts. It's still going to be a challenge for the Plaid Pantry site, regardless of where you move that thing. We also will increase some of the impacts to the church property on the northeast corner when you do that.
What are these green things?
So the green is kind of representative of median. It does not necessarily mean it's a landscape median. It can be a landscape median, but more likely it'll probably be paved to allow for vehicles coming off of driveways in certain locations to go in and out. As you get closer to the roundabout, some of it will be islands, some of it could be landscape, some of it will be hardscaped.
Something that really concerns me on that intersection every time I'm there is bicycles. And I'm wondering if we're going to be putting any green boxes in or...
Roundabouts typically do not have green boxes. So the way that this is designed, there are two options for cyclists using the roundabout. For a more competent cyclist or one that's more confident, they can take the lane just like a car. But this design has cutouts. So the bike lanes, as you see, they come in from all the directions. Looking at Warner Milne, for instance, you see that the bike lane ends and then there's a cutout that gets you into the sidewalk. And then we have a widened sidewalk portion that leads to the next crossing. And so a cyclist coming down Warner Milne could go into that space and cycle around and then take the crosswalks around to wherever they wanted to go and then dive back into the roadway on one of those ramps leading away from the roundabout.
And each of these pedestrian bike walkways will be signalized, right? I mean, they'll be able to put up a walk. I guess it's just a stop sign. I guess that's used.
So at the crosswalks, because of the complexity of this thing, we are considering incorporating what would be like the rapid rectangular flashing beacons.
Yes.
So that would be a potential option to address pedestrian safety, and that's something that we'd consider.
More often than not, they don't have those. But
No,
as
right,
we're
right.
as we want to make roundabouts
Where they-
more and more successful, of course, as you know, the beauty of roundabouts is you don't have a bunch of signalization that you have to maintain, and they move traffic efficiently, so you're not seeing a lot of vehicles sitting idly. And really, the biggest reason for roundabouts is they're much safer. You eliminate all the T-bone accidents that might occur at a regular intersection. So even though there's accidents in roundabouts, they're lower speed because you have to slow down, and then you don't have that crossing traffic kind of problem. So safety is one of the biggest reasons. Efficiency is one, but the whole idea is to not load them up with a lot of traffic signal kinds of things. But yet, as we see, the communities kind of demand more safety specifically for pedestrians, those rapid flashing beacons may be, the answer to that.
Yeah.
So what would be the issue with the parking? I mean, with the plug pantry?
Getting in and out. Right?
Getting in and out is a big issue. They'll have certainly issues
they have that
during
now.
Yeah, they have that now.
They do have that now. But this presents particular issues. We've changed their access to a one-way through access. So people would come through the roundabout, turn down Leland, and enter their parking lot from Leland, and then come out on Central Point. Now, that's not to say if we relocate the roundabout more north and west, we can accommodate two-way in and out, but that would be something that would have to be looked at as you develop a design option for this. They have concerns about truck access and delivery trucks getting in there, and which is a valid concern as well. They want to maintain pedestrian safety for the people that frequent their establishment.
Absolutely.
And so they have a lot of issues that they want to see addressed as part of this thing. When construction comes through, that will certainly be disruptive to their business, and so whoever does the design on this will have to take that into account and how best to stage the improvements.
Mm-hmm. So this is not the done deal plan. It could still be moved. Is that what you're saying?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a concept plan.
That's a concept plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a visionary thing.
It would seem for pedestrian safety, the one-way would be more safe than a two-way.
And that's part of the safety of roundabouts is that when pedestrians come to a point where they're in potential conflict with traffic, they only have to look in one direction.
Okay.
From those improvements that we identified, we looked to put forward an implementation plan. So we did cost estimates for each individual segment and specific non-segment improvement, and then prioritize those based on whether or not funding seemed easier, what was available. So we started with Gardner Middle School. There was a lot of public input that was supportive of that particular improvement, and it was a relatively low cost. So we put that forward as the number one priority. The Singer Creek connectivity improvements, again, because it was a relatively low cost and seemingly easier solution. Segment 1 improvements moved forward. There was a lot of public comment on that. It is, again, however, a significant cost for the project, but it was the biggest gap for the most amount of people to getting up and down the hill. And the City of Orange City only has a few routes for getting up the hill, and that being one of them as a major constraint. Mm-hmm. The roundabout was moved forward. It, again, is a significant cost, but because of recent right-of-way acquisition by the city, it seemed like an appropriate time to push that forward. And then Segment 3 and Segment 4, is a toss-up. We put Segment 3 forward just because it's again serves a little bit more of the public. And then Segment 2 at the end of this at the end of the list, just because there is some connectivity in that segment already, and it's just kind of an infill project. And then we are to next steps. We've gone through the Planning Commission process, and at this point we are looking for adoption of the plan by the City Commission.
I guess I'll ask the question from John. First of all, I think that roundabout's very critical. It wasn't that long ago we approved going from a R10 to an R8, and that area is already being built out very rapidly, and it's an area that we're going to have a lot of growth in. I think in terms of the South End concept plan, if it's going to work, it gives an alternative for people getting out of there that they don't have. When do you think we can get the money to put in on Roundabout?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if we go back to the money slide, that there is a lot of projects that are listed that come out of this corridor plan that I think are community values. Yet there's very few of them that are actually listed as funded projects in our transportation system plan. So we've got a gap between what we said we could fund through our SDCs and what this cost estimate looks like. And I think, we've been talking about SDCs. That's the balancing part that we struggle with a little bit. If we included all the projects that we wanted to build and we see community interest in, the price for SDCs goes up, right? Because you've got this, most of these improvements are capacity-related improvements. They essentially could qualify for SDC funding. But again, when we selected our list of SDC projects that would be funded under the TSP, we held our existing transportation SDC dollar amount because we didn't want to, same problem that we're facing now with the sewer. We're a little bit worried about how high our SDCs go. So we basically worked backwards and came up with a dollar amount that we could, how big of a list can we fund? And the roundabout's one of those. It's actually an unfunded project. It's identified as a priority, but it's an unfunded project. So right. I think, to me, we're going to have, if we want to move forward with that, we're going to have to make that a priority. We're going to have to allocate some gas tax funding, although we don't have a lot of gas tax funding that's not already used through our day-to-day operations for the street utility. PMUF, there's pavement condition concerns in all of those street sections that we could tap into some of our PMF funding. And I think, we would use some transportation. I think we'll adopt this to the transportation system plan, and we maybe need to make some decisions about whether or not we want to prioritize those, and something else could fall off the list. But we can make that decision. That's something that, I think those are the kind of decisions that you often will be asked to make. And then other than that, I think we just need to duke it out with the county and make sure we get some grant funding and make sure these are, I think that's part of the reason for the concept plan is that once we have that adopted plan, we can put together a better strategy for how we've vetted this through a public process. And so those kind of things make our applications for grant funding all the more favorable. And that's one of the reasons why we did it, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
That plus
exactly.
That plus, the other question is just that segment one, and that's a very important piece too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they're all important. We want them all.
That's
so we got to figure out how to do that.
The problem is they are all important.
But this is so important to have this corridor plan because, like you said, once we have the plan, then we can try to get grants and other types of funding, and then we also have a real cost estimate, and we know what we're looking at. We can prioritize. I think the plan was done really great. I think it meets all the concerns that I had anyway with that whole section. So good job.
I think it fits what the community expectations are. I mean, the community was good about saying, we don't need a major boulevard project here. We need to fill in the gaps, match what's existing, not change the character of our neighborhoods much. Obviously, the roundabout is way different than anything else. But other than that, it's basically trying to fill gaps and put useful infrastructure that the community will use. So.
Sure.
We a lot of support for every one of the segments at the open house. Property owners were voting. They were like, "I want my segment priority." So it's
Did you give them dots too?
We didn't do dots. Did we? We did not do dots.
Have you taken into account the access for the police in and out of this?
Well, the plans I've seen of the police, they don't have an access at the roundabout, so it's going to be it would be far enough away from the roundabout that it wouldn't have an impact.
Wouldn't have an impact. Okay.
Just follow the firefighters anyway, right, Jim?
They usually in our rear.
I knew that was coming. I couldn't resist.
I love it.
But everybody would be able to get to the police station safely on sidewalks.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
No.
So we'll bring back an ordinance for adoption, and need to talk. We need to figure out the priorities and how we get that worked into the TSP. But we'll keep working on that.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Exciting stuff.
Thank you, David.
All right, city managers report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of announcements to make about some employee accomplishments that I'm proud of our staff for achieving. First off, Jim Leffler, our HR director, and our safety committee. We have an internal safety committee, and our city has again won the safety award. I mean, this is becoming a pattern. Jim, do you want to
Jim's
say
here.
anything about it?
Sure, he'll come talk.
Good evening, Commission. As the Safety Committee Chair this time, this is the third CIS LOC Safety Award the city has received consecutively, and fourth in 5 years. We missed a year because I didn't know about it. So
congratulations to the city.
So that's our fourth award, and just a little bit of data on that. They looked at both full-time FTE and part-time FTE, and also volunteer hours. So we computed all that up, came up with over 410,000 work hours of both paid time and volunteer time. And of that, we only had 5 time loss accidents for the past year. So I'd like to acknowledge the Safety Committee for the work they do, the management team, and of course the employees who are a big part of it for keeping us safe.
That's right.
Now, is this award being made at the LOC?
It will be made at September 26th at the LOC conference.
Okay.
Were
We'll make sure somebody's there.
Were any of those time losses reportable on OSHA 300?
Of course.
Oh, they were?
Yes.
Well, that's...
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, all of them are actually. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
So,
Thank you, Jim. Also, our Parks Director, Scott Archer, isn't here tonight, but Scott has a distinction of being named the president of the State Parks and Recreation Association.
Wow.
So he's going to start his term as the president of that organization very soon.
Nice.
And
Does
we're
that
really
mean he
proud
can
of
bring
him.
more money to our parks?
Well, certainly expertise. I don't know. We have some ideas on the money. We'll be back later to talk about. Also, Kelly Burgoyne in the City Recorder's Office has achieved her certified municipal clerk designation, so we're really proud of Kelly's achievement.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to let the commission know that I'm going back to Charlotte, North Carolina for my annual training with ICMA. I'll be leaving on Saturday the 13th. I'll be gone the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th, but I'll be back here just in time for the STC discussion.
Oh, good.
Or I'm sorry, the rates discussion.
We're not talking STC.
We're not.
No,
That's
we're
right.
talking
We're
rates.
talking rates and moratorium.
Yes.
So I'll be back for round 2. I missed the first round of that. And then last, I hate to throw a curveball at the end of the meeting, but I want to know if we don't have very much time to do this. Some cities in Oregon, because of the ballot measure on recreational marijuana, you know what our position has been all along, but there are some cities that are passing ordinances that are essentially designed to catch all certain activities, essentially providing a tax on recreational marijuana in the event that it is ultimately sold in your city. And since the ballot measure precludes taxing that after the election date when it's effective, cities are rushing around.
Wow.
Ashland, Hillsborough, I think, has a 10% tax proposal. And we don't have any time, and I don't want to not talk to you about that, then have the date go by, and then we say shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Right.
Now, I haven't talked to the city attorney about this idea, but my thought was that if you decided you were interested in pursuing that, we could rush that on. We could get that onto your agenda just barely and get it dealt with before the elections. I think we could
So
make
we're
it.
asking whether we could tax something that we're not going to be permitted to permit to be.
Yes.
At this time. At
Yes,
this
and
time.
I'm envisioning the ordinance would be written to authorize you to do that, and then, of course, you can always repeal an ordinance and vote not to do it. You can decide not to do it. I'm concerned, though, that the ballot measure means if you don't do it now,
Yes.
before that deadline, you can undo a tax later, but I don't think you can impose it after that deadline, and that's what I'm concerned
I
about.
have no problem imposing a tax. I have a problem to have anybody here we collect the tax from.
Yes, we got that message pretty clearly, Your Honor.
Yeah.
That's why we have the boot and suspenders approach to that. So we still believe that preemption, federal law preempts the distribution and sale in the city, so on a recreational basis.
Yeah.
This wouldn't apply to medical marijuana. It would
Right.
only apply to recreational. So if you're interested in the city attorney doing any work on that, and you're interested in doing it on a brisk schedule, I need to know that, basically.
Well, I think it's good to be proactive.
'Cause it preserves one of your options.
100 years down the road, you don't know where we're going to be in.
I have a strong feeling we'll spend a lot more than the 10% policing the
Yes.
recreation, if you will.
Yep.
Yes.
So,
And we're going to have to pay for police officers, more police officers to learn that.
does anyone not want me to talk to the city attorney about that option and bring it back for consideration? Okay.
Rocky?
I haven't
Kathy?
talked to you about it, so I'm sorry about the surprise. And that's the extent of my report this evening.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Well, I have a question
Oh.
along that line. I was listening to a report this morning about electrical companies looking into the effect of marijuana growing operations on the utilities. Is there anything that, because they're saying like the marijuana grows like in Washington right now, the amount of power that it's taking to power those,
Lights?
it's like for a city of 60,000 people.
Oh, goodness.
Is that something we should be looking at as far as our, whatever happens with our utilities?
Oh, that's a good idea.
I don't know. I'm just speaking off the top of my head here.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that one a little bit.
Good question. Anything else?